240 times every second. That's how many times your phone's touchscreen scans the entire surface of the glass, all to find one single thing: where your finger is. What's surprising is that the technology behind that piece of glass isn't new at all. It dates back to 1965, before humans even set foot on the moon. A perfectly flat sheet of glass. No buttons. No moving parts. So how does it know exactly where you're touching, how many fingers are on the screen, and even tell the difference between a real finger and nothing more than a glove? That's exactly what we're going to uncover today. It all began in 1965, when British engineer E.A. Johnson laid the foundation for modern touchscreen technology, never imagining that his invention would one day change the way billions of people interact with machines. Over the following years, a series of new touchscreen technologies emerged. Resistive touchscreens were durable and inexpensive. Infrared touchscreens relied on an invisible grid of light beams. Then came surface acoustic wave (CAO) technology, offering exceptional accuracy, but at a much higher cost. For decades, each technology had its own strengths, and no one could say for certain which one would become the standard of the future. Then, in 2007, the first iPhone brought multi-touch capacitive technology to millions of people, changing the entire industry forever. But to understand why capacitive technology became the winner, we have to start with something surprisingly simple. The secret isn't inside your phone. It's inside your own body. It may sound hard to believe, but it's true. Your body can conduct electricity. Literally. Inside your body are water and ions, such as sodium and potassium, which allow electric charge to move. Beneath your phone's glass is an ultra-thin grid of electrodes, each carrying a tiny electrical charge. When your finger comes close, your body changes the electric field at that exact location. The change is so small that you can't feel it, but the touch screen can. What the screen is actually measuring is a change in capacitance, the ability to store electrical charge between conductive objects. When your finger touches the screen, that capacitance changes, signaling that a touch has occurred. This is also why ordinary wool gloves don't work on most touchscreens, because wool is an electrical insulator. On the other hand, water on your fingers contains ions and minerals that can interfere with the electric field, causing the screen to respond incorrectly or even register unintended touches. That explains why your phone can recognize your finger. But it still doesn't explain why, out of the dozens of touchscreen technologies that have existed over the years, capacitive technology was the one that ultimately survived. Capacitive touch wasn't the only technology in the race. It had competitors, and by several technical measures, some of them were actually more capable. Resistive touchscreens worked like a mechanical button. Press hard enough, and the two inner layers made contact, generating a signal. They were durable, inexpensive, resistant to dust and grease, and even worked while you were wearing gloves. Infrared touchscreens were even more clever. An invisible grid of light beams covered the entire display. As soon as your finger interrupted one of those beams, the system instantly knew where you were touching. Then there was surface acoustic wave, CAO technology, which used ultrasonic waves traveling across the glass surface to detect touches with extremely high accuracy. So why didn't one of these technologies become the winner? Because every technology came with trade-offs. Resistive screens only worked if you pressed hard enough. Infrared systems could be fooled by dust, or even an insect flying through the sensing area. Surface acoustic wave technology was highly sensitive to contamination and expensive to manufacture. Capacitive technology was different. It almost made you forget you were interacting with an electronic device. No pressing, no force, just a light touch, and the screen responded almost instantly. The technology that wins isn't always the most powerful. It's the one that delivers the most natural user experience. But that victory raises an even more interesting question. How can a perfectly flat piece of glass know the exact spot where you're touching? The answer lies in a material that's almost invisible: indium tin oxide, or ITO. It's an ultra-thin, transparent coating. So transparent that you can't even see it with the naked eye. But beneath your phone's glass, the ITO layer is patterned into thousands of tiny conductive traces arranged in an XY grid. Imagine it as an incredibly tiny chessboard. Each intersection of those conductive traces serves as a sensing point for measuring capacitance. When your finger touches the screen, the capacitance in that area changes. But detecting a change isn't enough. The controller inside your phone, the brain of the touchscreen, must continuously scan the entire electrode grid. Not just once, but dozens or even hundreds of times every second. With each scan, it measures the capacitance at thousands of sensing points and compares the results with the previous scan. From the entire region where the values have changed, it calculates the exact position of your finger. The whole process happens so quickly that you never notice any delay. Swipe your finger once, and the screen responds almost instantly. If you place two fingers on the screen at the same time, how does your phone know exactly which touch belongs to which finger? For years, this was a problem that challenged engineers. Early capacitive touchscreens measured each row and each column of the electrode grid separately, using a method known as self-capacitance. It worked perfectly with a single finger. But as soon as two fingers touched the screen at the same time, everything became much more complicated. Imagine placing two fingers on opposite corners of a rectangle. The system knows that two rows and two columns have changed, but it has no way of knowing which two corners the fingers actually occupy. As a result, it imagines two extra touch points that don't really exist. These are known as ghost points. For many years, this was the biggest obstacle preventing multi-touch capacitive screens from becoming practical in consumer devices. Interestingly, the problem wasn't the screen itself, it was the way it measured touch. The solution was mutual capacitance. Instead of measuring each row and column separately, the system measures the capacitance directly at each intersection of the grid. Every touch point can now be identified independently, with no need for guesswork. And that single change unlocked everything. Pinch to zoom, rotating photos, multi-finger gestures, multi-touch gaming. All of it became possible because of one small change in the way a touchscreen controller measures capacitance. What changed wasn't the glass itself. What changed was the way it understood what your hands were doing. But all of that technology would be meaningless without something much simpler. A sheet of glass strong enough to survive in your pocket every single day. This story begins in the 1960s, when Corning developed an ultra-durable glass called Chemcore. But at the time, no one really knew what to do with it. There was no market, no suitable product. Chemcore was shelved and remained largely forgotten for more than 40 years. Until 2006. Steve Jobs was preparing to launch the first iPhone. The original prototype used a plastic screen, but he refused to accept that the most important product of his career could be scratched simply by sharing a pocket with a set of keys. Jobs turned to Corning with what seemed like an impossible request. a piece of glass that was both incredibly thin and tough enough to replace plastic. Corning revisited its ChemCore technology and refined it into a new generation of glass designed for smartphones. That glass became Gorilla Glass. Within just a few years, Gorilla Glass had found its way onto billions of devices and became the standard for many of the world's premium smartphones. Sometimes, the technology that changes the world isn't the newest invention. It's an old idea that simply waits for the right moment to come back to life. It all began with a handwritten idea in 1965. 42 years later, that idea finally found its true home in a smartphone released in 2007. And from that moment on, it never stopped. Today, 8 billion people repeat the same gesture hundreds of times every day, almost never thinking about what's happening beneath their fingertips. What's fascinating is that this journey also reveals the biggest lesson of all. The technologies that win aren't always the most powerful. They are the ones that become so natural that people forget they even exist. And if that's true, then the next question is a simple one. What will be the next interface so seamless that we won't even notice it? Until it's everywhere.